And so we're going to kickstart the session with a bit of general sharing. My name is Evan. Nice to meet all of you, and thank you for joining us this Monday morning. And so, hi, feel free to jump in whenever you need to add on a few more things, all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just run you through a bit of an update on what's been going on in holistics. So we've actually been working, our engineering team has been very hard at work at pushing out new features and new releases. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen that as well on the changes in the UI and the improvements we've been making. So just to share a little bit about some of the more exciting things that have come up, we've actually recently done a bit change to the filter permission syntax, this supporting of an else condition, which I'm going to show you later during this session. And version control history is actually one of the big ones that we've done as well. And in the upcoming feature pushes that we're doing, there'll be drilling options in embedded dashboards and data models. That's actually one of the really exciting things that we're working on, which is actually a big part of where we see the holistics product going. And we'll be sharing more with you in our blogs and other publications. So look out for some of those articles we'll be producing there. So this is one of the features that I've just mentioned about the new features of an advanced column level data access. And that version control history, which now means that, you know, it's just like GitHub, where you can revert back to a previous version. Now you can do that for your reports. So if any mistakes happened on your reports, you can actually now go back to a previous version that you saved and all those settings in the configuration, so you don't have to worry about those mistakes. So let me get into the main topic for today that all of you have joined us for the controlling of data governance in holistics using our permissions feature.
Nice. Let's get started.
All right. So if you're using us on holistics, I believe you'd also subscribe to the idea that data processes actually are a key differentiator when it comes to running your business and your organization. And Gartner has actually shown that business intelligence, one from the survey, is actually one of the key differentiating technologies when it comes to leveraging on data. And there are these 5 different levels which we believe that we can help our customers to reach using our product. And there's always this idea, right, of a data-driven culture. So that really means this promised land, this holy grail of data accessibility. We want it to be convenient and easy for the members of our team to be able to access the information as quickly as they can when they need it, to be able to make the decisions and to automate operations even, as we believe you can with holistics. So that's the thing, right? So data accessibility is something that we believe helps organizations, but then that's the balance that we need to strike with controlling access, because that's the issue of security. Because it's been the common saying that actually the weakest link in the security chain is actually the people, and it's the human errors that results in a lot of mistakes or even breaches occurring. So how do we actually find that balance? So that's the thing, right? When it comes to business intelligence tools and reporting, there's some approaches that they'll use is to actually create different reports for different teams. But what that means is that you actually end up with a lot of reports, a report sprawl. And then in that situation, that actually increases the chances of leakages and errors. So the more reports you have to maintain across different countries, different departments, the chances of errors goes up. So how do you actually find that balance? So this is something that we believe in, that usually when it comes to most typical organizations, data governance is actually what they would say in the hierarchy of needs of reporting, probably the topmost. It's nearly like the self-actualization portion of needs, right? Where you actually think about it as something as a later consideration when your company gets to a scale that you actually need to start worrying about, okay, access and security. But the reality is this. In fact, a lot of times when it comes to choosing the right tools, the data problems that we originally face leads us to choose the tools that actually address those problems, which then actually results in finding people that are able to specialize in the skills for using those tools. And in fact, that then actually affects the organization setup that you have down the track. So how do you actually start with something that is scalable and can progress with you over time? So this is where our data access permissions comes in, this topic for today. Striking the balance between the simplicity of data access as well as balancing the increased governance friction that occurs when you start implementing more controls. So that's the thing, right? So holistics, our approach to permissions controls is that we can actually help you with that on your front end, so you don't have to worry about that on the back end. And what we think of in the holistics approach is actually how can you keep data governance agile in your organization. And so today, the features I'm going to show you is exactly how you can implement that in your company. That's a scene out of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah.
Okay, so the important thing to note here is the three roles in holistics that we've actually allowed admins to assign to the users that join their holistics company tenant. So there's a business user that can only view reports and dashboards that are shared with them. Then there's the analyst who is able to create and edit reports and dashboards. And then there's the admin who has full control over the resources, adding data sources to holistics and management of the holistics BI platform. So let me jump straight into the first example that I'm going to give to you, which is about the report and folder access controls and how we can actually create different views using the exact same reports. So this is what we talk about in addressing that report sprawl. In holistics, you can actually use the same report to address multiple teams without having to create new reports for each team when you go forward. So let me just share that. Okay, so let me see. Can everyone see my my screen over here?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let me just share with you quickly the way that our team level permissions works. So let's start off with the users table. And so this is really where it begins when it comes to data access permissions in holistics. So there's the idea of the users and the groups. So over here is where you can actually start building groups. Let's say you've got country teams and you have maybe department teams like finance and sales. So here's where you actually add new groups that you want to assign people to. And from there, that's where you can actually start from inviting your users and you can assign them these various roles. Are they a business user? Are they an analyst? Are they an admin? And then you can just add them on to the different groups from here. So now let's see what that means. For example, let's refresh this page. As the holistics admin, you're able to see what the folders, what the reports are shared with for the different groups here. So for example, this country folder is shared with these teams. So let's see what next happens. A feature that's very useful for admins to understand what your users are seeing is called the impersonate feature. So think about it something like the that Facebook view what your friends will see if they come to your page. It's a similar logic over here. So let's impersonate a guy called Jordan from the sales team. So you can see that over here he only has permission for this folder. So what would he see if he were to come in here? Right, so this is actually the same page, but if Jordan were to access it, as he's a business user, he only sees the reporting tab, and he's only able to see the folder that has been shared with him, which is the sales folder. So this logic of being able to share folders, share reports, share dashboards, it applies in this exact same manner. And for example, any reports that you put into a folder that has been shared with these teams, you can then edit that access. If not naturally, they would actually inherit that access from that folder that the report belongs to. So now let's go inside here, the country reports. And if at any point you guys have questions that you would like to just jump in and ask to clarify, feel free to shoot the questions over to Hai, and Hai will let me know. So over here, I'm going to show you that first example of, let's say, controlling a view based upon the country teams that they belong to. So over here, we have a report that has a drop-down of the various countries, and you can actually see what will happen if, say, we have a user who comes from, let's say, Vietnam. Let's see what you'll see. So the way this report's been configured is that for anybody who joins from the various country teams, if they were to see the report, all they can access is their own details for their team. So over here, what you see is the Vietnam team appears only within the dropdown. And for example, if I were to have a user, let's say this guy called Robert, who has access to both the Malaysia and Singapore team details. Yeah. So over here, so now the question is, how do we set that up to be able to limit the views for these country teams? So let's go into editing this report. So this actually comes back to what we call our secret sauce in holistics, our filters. So over here, we have this filter, the country filter, in the dropdown, and it has this variable name, which actually goes inside the SQL query for your report. So when it's inside double curly braces, you know that's the variable for the filter. And if we actually look at how this was set up, so for one thing, this list of countries was actually pulled using a SQL query. So there are three ways you can actually build a drop-down filter such as this. You can do it manually. You can pull it from a database table with the schema name and the values, the column names, or using SQL, raw SQL, just to pull it out, which you can preview here. But the secret sauce is here under permissions. So this is where we actually key in that if they belong to the group Singapore, they can see the value Singapore. If they belong to the group Malaysia, they can see the value Malaysia, and so on for the different countries. And this is actually how you configure your group access. And these names match what we saw earlier inside the user and the groups tables inside your settings. This is where you actually assign those group permissions and what they will see if they were to access that filter. And similarly, another feature we have on this, similar to the way this operates, is a column-based view for a single column-based control. So let's say we have a report that actually allows you to pull a single value out, say sales, profit, costs, and you want to be able to limit it based on which team is coming into this report to see a different view. So for example, let's impersonate. What will Jordan from sales see if he were to come in here? So the view that Jordan has is only of the sales column. And you can see from the query here how this is built. So let me jump into editing the report so you can see where this logic comes from for the permissions for this filter. So similarly, using that whole filter value, and this time this filter name is called values, we can have a look at how this filter was built. So this time it was using manual entries, and the permissions were such that if they belong to the group finance, they can see the values profit or cost and select that from the dropdown. But if they belong to group sales, the only value they can access is sales. And you can see how that relates into this query over here and what we'll actually execute. So if they belong to the team sales, the value that comes up here is sales. Or if they belong to finance, they can choose whether they want profit or cost to appear inside this query. And that is actually the two ways that you can actually do your basic controls for, say, country teams and department teams when it comes to accessing your reports.
Okay.
Okay, so I hope everyone's still with me so far.
So far, so good. Yeah. So, oh, we have a first question. We will go into the Q&A now, and Evan?
Well, actually, we still have two more examples that I'll go through. Maybe you can let me know the question, and if it's still part of the flow, I can see whether I can address it now.
Okay, so we have the first question is, if a user cannot access the data from some report, are the reports shown in the folder view?
Okay, perfect. All right, actually, that's a good example. So let me just jump back in to show you how that will appear. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So similarly, just now when I was showing you what happens if you were to impersonate a user to see whether they can have access to the folders. So let's see in this situation here. Okay, so this reports inside this folder can be seen by these various groups. So what happens is, let's say I impersonate the user that is from the marketing team. What reports will they see? So even though this is actually the same folder, the marketing team member can only see these reports that have been shared with them and not the other reports. So that's how you can also control access to viewing reports, even though it's the same folder. The reports are still there, but they just can't see it because they haven't been allocated to the group that has those permissions.
Okay.
So in this second example, so that's actually using the if-else logic, which was one of the new features that I just talked about earlier on in the presentation. And so what we actually can control here is the data source and the if-else logic syntax, as well as filter permissions for say, for example, date restrictions.
Mm.
So let's have an example here of a management team report that can see the full employee details. But if the marketing team were to access this table, which has email and salary data, marketing should only see email data, and finance should only see salary data, whereas management can see everything. So let's see how this works. Okay, so this report is called the company employee list report. Can everyone see it?
Not yet. Okay. Okay. So now.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. So this is a report where, okay, we have two special drop-down filters here, one called show salary and show email. And of course, this actually can be hidden to business users. But in this example, I'm going to just have it visible so you can see what's actually going on. So now let's impersonate. Let's have a look here. So the management view, you can actually see email data and salary data as well over here. And let's say what happens if I were to impersonate marketing. So over here, now you'll see that somehow the value for show salary filter has changed to no and show email is yes. And all the marketing team member can see is this email address over here. And similarly, if I were to impersonate finance, so we've got Bruce Wayne over here. So for Bruce Wayne, he doesn't see the email, but he can see the salary column. And if they belong to the supergroup called management. So we've got Jon Snow over here. So let's say the King of the North comes in to have a look at his employee list, and he's able to see the full table. So how are we able to configure this inside our report? So the first thing I want to draw attention to before I go inside the report editor is if you were to actually debug the query for this report, you will see that there are these two values, and how this actually worked inside the report editor is using our special holistics feature called the if conditions. So let's break this down over here. We've got a query portion that says if show email equals to yes, then email column, or if show salary is yes, then salary column. So actually, if you have a look at how this was structured,
it looks like you put an auto filter, right? A value there, and then we use the symbol if then.
Yes, exactly that. So if you look over here, so the way we've structured this is using the manual pair of a value of yes and no with that display value, and inside the permissions. So it says here that if the group is management, then value yes. If group finance, then value yes. And else, value is no. So that means that for everyone else that is not part of the group management or finance, the value will default to no. A default value right there. So
it's like a hidden filter, and then you put the condition there, right?
Correct. So it's a combination of both that filter combined with this if condition inside the query itself, which you can build inside holistics. So just so you can see how it appear in execution. So for example, I've got an analyst, this guy called the awesome analyst. I've assigned him to the marketing team, just so you can see how this would appear. So the awesome analyst goes into this report, and the value for salary, because he's part of the marketing team, defaults to no. And if you see what actually executes in the query, only that email if condition was satisfied, which is why email appears, whereas the if condition for salary was not satisfied. So that column doesn't actually run in the final query. So that's how you can actually modify the queries that run using the holistics filter permissions.
Okay.
And so another example of more advanced permissions, let me use an example over here. So let's say we've got an example where we have a team that was just set up in Singapore, let's say after 2014. So we want them to be able to access a report, but only see data after 2014 and not before that. So in this situation, if we were to impersonate the Singapore user, suddenly for the date options that they can choose, the furthest back it can go is 2014. But if those group restrictions were not on, then you can actually access all these other dates from before. So let's have a look at how we actually add that into that filter here. So over here, for this start date filter, for the date filter, what we have is a then date minimum condition. So it says that if you're part of the group Singapore, then the minimum date that you're able to access is 2014, 1st of January 2014, which is why when that Singapore user went into that report, the only dates that they could select was from 2014 onwards. And you can actually also add a maximum condition for dates. And it's actually, we have all these different variables that you can actually create inside your holistics report, detailed in our documentations page. So you can definitely look there for examples of how you can actually add this inside your filters, which gives you a wide range of flexibility to be able to control the views that people can see. Mm. And so another situation which we find actually comes up for some of our customers that comes up useful is, say this so far, we've been having a look at some of the mostly business user restrictions, but how about a data analyst? How would you do that? So over here, I want to give you an example of how you could actually create those sort of analyst restrictions. So we have two data sources here, and one is shared with all analysts, and the other one is shared with this special analyst called the awesome analyst. And if you actually look at these two data sources, they're actually the same database, just with different username and passwords. So that means that from that approach, you can actually create a different username, password access for these different data sources, which will then control what those analysts are able to see. So in this example here, right? So where Postgres demo is shared with all analysts, and this private data source is only shared with the awesome analysts. If we have a look at the data manager and we were to impersonate what these different data analysts can see, so let's say I impersonate an analyst called Elon Musk. Mm. So because the data source that was only shared with the awesome analyst isn't shared with other analysts, the only thing he can see in his data source selection is that single data source that has been shared to him. And over here, if we were to use, say, a different analyst who has access to all the different data sources, then over here, that analyst will be able to see the full range of data sources that has been shared with them. So this is one of the ways they can actually control the access also for analysts and at a data source level. So the type of tables they can query will be different as well based on how you set up those table permissions. Okay, so this third example I'm going to give you is one of the more unique situations, and this will be the final example before we go over to the Q&A session. So this one is interesting. So we've got a situation here where, okay, we have permissions where we want to generate for, say, we've got 6 different managers managing 50 different stores, all right? And each manager should only see the reports for the stores that they manage. So now what we're going to do in this example, we're going to show you how you can actually generate that access using a query to your database. So you can actually have this where with the feature, all you have to do is actually update your system and those tables to be able to control what these different managers will see for the stores that they can access. So I'm going to show you using this example of these 3 tables. So one is the managers table, one would be the stores that they can, the full list of stores, and then the store permissions of which stores should be allocated to which user IDs. And then you can see how this is actually generated on our permissions syntax over here. All right, so actually before I jump into that, I think it's useful if we see how it would report the end result. So it's easier here, I feel, to actually visualize what the end result will be and then go back to see how it was actually achieved. All right. So we're going to see over here this, this report, which actually has different stores, all those 50 stores that we've mentioned earlier. And it's been shared with this group called managers, so store managers. Mm. So now let's impersonate one of the managers. So let's say a manager from Vietnam. What are they going to be able to see? So this manager, he goes in, he or she goes in, and all they can see is actually a limited list of the stores that they manage. And similarly, let's have another manager called Nasi Lemak. So this manager, all that they can see is just this limited list of the stores that they manage. So now let's have a look at how we'd actually structure this. So actually, if you look at the permissions over here, you'll see that it comes back to this filter. So over here, we have these values generated from a database table, from the table called stores, where the value field is store ID, and the text values are name, which comes up as this list. So now let's have a look at these permissions, all right? So over here, we have a situation that says that if they're part of the group manager, then SQL. So let's break this down step by step to see what this means. So it says the SQL that should run comes from this data source ID. And this data source ID actually comes from our data sources ID over here. So it says, all right, if they belong to the group manager, take this data source called Postgres private of ID 1464 and run this query. It says select store ID from store permissions. And the key part here is actually where email equals to user email. So this is a special variable that we've created inside Holistics that allows you to access those tables to be able to determine the list of which manager or email value should be permitted to see which stores. So let's have a quick look at what those three tables look like inside the data manager. So here we have the stores table with the store ID values. And here we have the manager values, which says, all right, the user ID values and their matching email addresses. And then we have the permissions table here, which says that this store ID 1 belongs to user ID 1, store ID 2 belongs to user ID 4, and so on. And so that's actually what's going on over here inside this query that's just been run inside the filter. And that's how what happens in actual execution is that once you've run this query using those three tables, you then have a report which allows you to control what they can access based upon their emails, based upon the values that they log in. So the manager is only able to see the stores that they manage. So this one is it's a slightly trickier filter permission, and definitely I would highly recommend taking a look at our docs page on how this actually would be structured. But once you get the hang of it, this is actually something that allows you to generate the permissions directly from the tables in your database, making it sort of a lot easier to be able to automatically create that rather than having to manually build that. And so that's actually the three examples we have for our different permissions values. So now I think let's switch over to the Q&A session. I think we're running a little bit over time from the presentation, but it's okay. We can actually probably take a few questions before we wrap it up.
Yep, all right. So I believe there are two questions that belong to the example number 2, where you show the, financial things. Those two questions are, the first one, does the email and salary column come from the same table, or can they be displayed from different table?
Absolutely. So actually inside Holistics, we allow you to build joins very easily using our report editor. So as long as you have all the tables inside that same data source, you can actually then build a table, a report joining different tables. And even the filter, you can actually create the filters from a different data source to put in. So yes, absolutely. You can have a situation where you have a report that has taken data from two different tables in your same data source, and then actually filter based on that for the permissions.
Okay, so we have another question belong to the example 2. So can I hide the filter so the marketing and finance user don't see that I can see their data were restricted by the filter?
Sure, I think this one is probably useful if I show you how it would appear. Okay, so let's go back into that report again. So exactly, so what I was doing back there, I had this two filters appearing up here for us to be able to follow the example easily, but you can actually set it such that it's hidden. So you can say, all right, I want this filter to be hidden for business users. So now if we were actually to impersonate one of those, let's say the marketing team, to go inside this report, then all they can see inside the report is just the data without actually realizing that it's a limited view for the report. So those filters are now hidden to them. And if you end that, then the full table comes back again. So similarly, if I think maybe just to clarify again, so what happened was that it became show email yes and show salary no, but that values were actually hidden to those business user. And similarly, if I were to impersonate Bruce Wayne, so once again, because he's a business user, those filters are hidden, but the table generates the correct view for them. Whereas here is show salary yes and show email no. So that's the hiding filters from business user feature.
Okay, so thank you, Evan. So I think like we have time for the rest of two questions. So yeah, those two questions is about the permission. Mark asked question like, how does admin extract the full list of user with group and report assigned to each user? So which means, like you have a full list, this user belong to this group, and then, like a list of report and dashboard that user are allowed to accept. So how can we do that holistic?
Right, okay. So for now, the way that we actually control that sort of view of what users and groups can see, it's actually using our users management section over here. So this is where you'll say, okay, let's have roles business users. So now you have that list. So it's, okay, these business users, what groups do they have access to? And they can control it from here. And let's search for, let's say, analysts. Okay, so the analysts that I have in my tenant, these are the groups they have access to. And if I switch back to all, then you actually can see that. And of course, to see the groups that you have actually created, it's from this admin management panel with the different groups that you can then say, all right, in this group, who are the users who belong there? And in this group, which users have been assigned? So that's where you can actually manage your permissions for your different users and groups inside these control panel sections. And definitely, if there are feature requests that you would like to send to our team, you can always shoot us an email at support@holistics.io with the feature requests that you have in mind, and we can see how they can fit into the roadmap of whether we'll be able to add that in. As you know, that our engineers are actually the support team as well. So every time they see and experience something that you feed back to them, they're always thinking of ways to build that into the product so you can actually get the best experience from there.
Yep, so a very simple question. Can analyst role set up permission, or only admin role can set up the permission for all the users?
Yes, so the way we've actually set it up right now is that only the admin will be able to control the groups and the permissions. So analysts can create and edit the reports and dashboards, but when it comes to allocating the groups and the permissions for users, that's actually an admin feature. So yeah, so I think that's all we have for today. So thank you all very much for joining us. It was great to have this first webinar session with you all. And thank you for the teams that requested that we do this session for you. And this is something that we're going to be running on an ongoing basis. We'll probably be scheduling the next one next month. So if you have any ideas or suggestions on topics you would like to see us cover, just contact myself or Hai, or write to us at hello@holistics.io. And yeah, from my side, I want to say thanks, and Hai.
So yeah, thank you again for coming to the webinar today, and hope you all have a great week ahead.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on a Monday morning. Have a great week. See you all soon.
See you.
All right, take care.